Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Populist Podcast. I'm Chase,
I'm Charles.
and today we're joined by the Democratic nominee for Senate in South Dakota, Dan Ahlers. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me on your podcast, guys.
All right, do you want to go ahead and start us out by telling us who you are, where you come from, and why you're running?
Yeah, Dan Ahlers. I'm a former Democratic state legislator from Del Rapids, South Dakota. I'm running for the United States Senate. And one of the reasons I'm running is I'm tired of the partisan bickering that's going on in Washington, D.C. We need more people that can work together to get things done. I have a record of that in the state legislature, and I'm hoping to take that to Washington, D.C. to work on behalf of the people of South Dakota.
All right, well, I'm going to get the ball rolling, starting with foreign policy. You've often cited former Democratic presidential nominee from your home state, George McGovern, as a personal role model of yours. One thing McGovern became renowned for was his fight against the war in Vietnam, most notably with the McGovern-Hatfield Amendment. However, you've expressed antithetical sentiments in the Middle East, stating that if we leave too soon, the power vacuum left in our absence will be filled by our enemies. What would you say to Americans that are fed up with the U.S. involvement that has lasted decades and only seemingly created more instability in the region?
Well, the fact that we have created more instability in the region is true. I think, though, the war that we started more than 2 decades ago has created a lot of the instability in the Middle East. It's compounded by the by some of the uprisings in other nations with the the Arab Spring. That has compounded it. But I think that now that we're there, we're committed. I mean, if you look at some of the lessons that we could learn from the past, from when we have left an area, even when we were helping Afghanistan early in the 80s with the Taliban and the Russian aggression or Soviet aggression that was going on there, we left. And when we did, we left a vacuum that allowed these radical groups to come in to indoctrinate people, and it's led to our involvement now in the Middle East. So I think it's important that we go in and we work to create stability there, to help free and democratic governments form. We need to be conscientious, and this is where we can improve things, of the cultural differences and what our expectations should be relative to the culture of the people that are in that area, and try and help those groups and those different factions come together. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be easy. I don't think it necessarily always requires a heavy military hand. I think there's a necessity for presence because of the instability, but I don't know that we need to have a lot of military force in the Middle East.
All right, well, keeping on the foreign policy topic, you've stated in the past that, quote, the United States could face the consequences of picking a trade fight with China, end quote. How would you propose to maintain mutually beneficial Sino-American relations while maintaining a tough stance on minor Chinese provocations, such as the theft of international intellectual property?
That's a great question. The first part, what we're seeing right now from the current administration is they say they want to get a trade deal done, or they're getting a trade deal done, but then they turn around and say things that cause friction between the two countries. They will blame, the president will blame China for the COVID pandemic and call it things like the Kung Fu flu and stuff like that. Really inappropriate things. Those harm our working relationships with foreign nations. We can expect fair trade and we can work towards fair trade deals, but we need to do it from a place of strength and being able to bargain. One of the mistakes that the president made in trying to get a fair trade deal with China is that he started kicking the beehive or shaking the beehive before he had a backup plan. As a small business owner, if I have a vendor that I'm working with that I don't feel like I'm getting a fair deal from, I'll go out and talk to other vendors first. And I'll try and come up with a better deal or an equal deal so that I can go back to that other vendor that I've been doing business with and say, listen, Either you can give me a better deal here, you can treat me a little more fairly, or I can go somewhere else. They didn't do that. It's a very simple, basic business principle that our president ignored, and we can do a better job that way. Your second question, can you repeat the second part of your question again?
How would you propose to maintain mutually beneficial Sino American relations while maintaining a tough stance on minor Chinese provocations, such as the theft of international intellectual property?
Well, and I think that having good foreign relationships with other countries too and strong trade partners helps us by having a team of, of partners that will work and help hold China accountable. I don't know that we can necessarily do it on our own. And it's not just an American issue, it's a global issue. And I think that if you keep good trade relationships and good foreign relationships with a lot of countries, you can once again work from a place of power.
All right, changing lanes now. I'm going to move on to the environment. In South Dakota, the oil and gas industry is a substantial part of the economy. However, scientists have been warning us to move more and more towards renewable technologies in order to combat the threat of climate change. As senator, how would you work to make sure that workers across the country, like in your home state, are taken care of while also taking into account what the scientists are saying?
Well, in South Dakota, we don't have as much oil and natural gas. That's more of a North Dakota uh, issue. But I think, in the broader sense of how do you take care of those folks, I think there are a lot of job opportunities and job creation opportunities in the renewable energy sector. But your question is, and kind of has the correct approach to it. You need to be cognizant of an entire other industry, a fossil fuel industry that is already developed in there, and you have people trained in those jobs. Where do they go? And I think that's the part that gets forgotten about quite often. And I think that we need to work in partnership with the fossil fuel industry. I think they can see the writing on the wall. We need to provide a path to encourage them to get on board with the renewable energy uh, philosophy and start working on technology and getting involved with the research that goes into renewable energy. I think that the government will need to provide training uh, and help those companies as well as renewable energy companies transition people into a new industry and a new job market. And I think we can do that. We've done it before, we can do it again.
All right, so this is something you touched on earlier. So, a point of contrast that you've drawn quite clearly between yourself and incumbent Senator Mike Rounds is in your willingness to reach across the aisle to achieve solutions. In an increasingly polarized political climate, many voters are disappointed with this sort of compromise, which often leads to, in their eyes, milquetoast reforms. In a time that tens of thousands of people die every year due to a lack of healthcare, and millions face the existential threat of climate change, do you believe that enough can be done to mitigate these destructive forces while still maintaining civility and camaraderie across party lines?
Absolutely. I've made an entire legislative, well, my entire time in the legislature, spent building those relationships and working across party lines. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes a little bit of time, but if you take the time to sit down and have a conversation with someone on the opposite side of the aisle, get to know them, get to know what's important to them, you will find that we have more things in common than we have different. And more often than not, that leads to you working together on projects. The only meaningful change that we will see in this country is by having both sides coming together and working together on an issue. Anytime one side goes at it, whether it be the Affordable Care Act, where it was primarily Democrats and it was passed by Democrats and it was shoved down the other side's throat, or the executive orders passed by President Obama, or the executive orders passed by President Trump, those things don't last. And you can see with the ACA, when one side doesn't involve the other side is sitting there constantly picking things apart. And they're trying to sabotage it and make it so it doesn't work so they can say, see, it didn't work. And we're working on our second decade here of the ACA, and there's this systematic dismantling of it just to prove a point. We should be sitting down, uh, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, whatever the flavor might be, and we should be working on a common goal. Affordable quality health care is not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's a people issue.
Staying on the topic of healthcare, currently nationwide, we are seeing a record number of new COVID cases each day. What specifically do you think needs to be done at a federal level to curb the spread of an already extremely contagious virus?
Well, I think we need our members of Congress to stand up to the president on this particular issue because mixed signals are being sent. And we can't even have a discussion, or people can't even wear masks without it becoming a political issue. And different places in the country are going to need different measures, different supplies, and we'll have different needs. Areas that are more sparse are going to have a different plan than areas like New York City. It's not a one size fits all. But we need people in Congress that, one, will say you need to take the proper safety precautions. You should be wearing a mask when you go out. You should be social distancing. You should be mindful of your health impacts on other people. And then we need to make sure that we have programs like the CARES Act that actually work for our businesses. One of the flaws of the payroll protection program is it basically creates or is asking a business owner to be an extension of unemployment. Not all businesses are the same. Not every business has 75% of that money that needs to go to payroll. So I think you need a flexible program, one that addresses the needs of each individual business owner. It's already based on their financials, so we can certainly work from that and create a protection program for these businesses that will be adaptive and useful to the vast majority of our business owners. And I think that we need to make sure that we have enough testing and that we have enough supplies. We're already seeing with this ramp up of COVID in some of these states like Arizona and Texas and Florida, they're running out of supplies. This is the second time where our government is not learning from its mistakes. We didn't listen to the warnings early on. We ignored them. We're not going to be impacted by this. And then all of a sudden, we've got a problem. We're going to ramp up all the production. We're going to have enough tests. We're going to have enough supplies. But that didn't happen. And we needed a unified voice in Congress, Republicans and Democrats, that are saying, hey, we need to get this done. And it's not a partisan issue. Once again, it's a people issue. And I think that that's where we need to work from. And we need people that understand business, that understand how COVID has impacted their community. I'm very involved as the chamber president in Del Rapids with working with our businesses, with our city, with our medical community to minimize the impact that COVID has had here in our hometown. And we need to take that same principle and move it to a state level and a national level.
All right, so I have one last question, and it's more of a cultural issue. Recently, statues and cultural icons have come under fire as a byproduct of the Black Lives Matter movement. One that has come under increasing scrutiny is in your home state, Mount Rushmore, a monument that detractors would say, at best, is dedicated to four white supremacists on stolen tribal land. What do you believe the government should do to balance people of color's demands, commercial interests, and cultural legacy?
Well, I think that there's a variety of different levels at which we're looking at statues, monuments. Some of these statues that have been taken, Confederate statues that have been taken down, were actually put up in the early 1900s, kind of as a thumbing of the nose of equal rights and the ending of slavery and a protecting of heritage. I don't necessarily think we need to tear these monuments down. One of the interesting things that you'll find if you go to Europe, and in particular Germany, Um, Germany had to really struggle with its history, especially after uh, World War II, the Nazis, and the crimes that they committed against the Jewish people. And one of the things that you'll see when you go over there are little placards all over the place of a place where a Jewish family once lived, where they were taken from their homes. And I think you can take these monuments that already exist and put another plaque or something next to it that has an educational value to it to help remind us of the mistakes that we've made in the past. I think tearing down all of these statues, all of these different monuments, and trying you're erasing some history, and you could potentially be erasing a reminder of a time that we need to remember so that we don't repeat those mistakes again. And once again, those people that are upset about the tearing down of the statues, that are upset because it's part of their heritage, I don't know that I want uh, to be. A, I don't want to be affiliated with uh, being a racist. Some of those things are offensive and do need to be dealt with. For some, I think it's a local issue, but I do think that we need to be mindful of the history. I think we can make this an educational moment, a teachable moment, where we don't forget some of the crimes that we've committed, whether it's against African Americans in slavery or our native folks uh, that live on the reservations. A lot of the issues that we've dealt with over the years in the state legislature and our tribes, a lot of the problems that we've had have come from not communicating with them and not understanding culture. And there are a lot of lessons to be learned. And I think that this is a moment in time that we can turn into a teachable moment.
All right, well, that's all the questions we have for you today. If you'd like to take a moment to address the audience directly, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. Um, I just want to say to all the voters out there from South Dakota, if you want somebody that is going to work for you, that's going to listen to you, and get something done, I have a record of that. I've been doing it for you for 6 years in the state legislature and peer. I would love to be your next U.S. Senator. I will promise you that I will work hard for you every day and that I will never quit trying to get things done on behalf of the people of South Dakota.
All right, that's all we have for you guys today. If you'd like to support Dan's campaign, the links to his website as well as his social media will be down in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.